Welcome to Drawsh Studio. Today we're going to learn about the line, shape, form, gesture method for an easy and effective way to draw the human figure. Let's get started. Gesture has no rules. It can be made of long flowing lines, passages of tone, scribbles, shapes, or any other kind of mark. A gesture can be a short standalone drawing or the start of a multiple-hour pose. In either case, a gesture is a quick sketch to try to quickly capture the energy, basic structure, and essence of the pose. If there are no rules for gesture, it can be difficult to know where to start or to get consistent results. To help us, we break the figure down into simple building blocks of lines, shapes, and forms. This is the line, shape, form, or LSF method. Lines have length, and they can be thick or thin, straight or curved, hard or soft. Shapes have two dimensions, height and width. The most basic shapes are the square, circle, and triangle. Forms have three dimensions, height, width, and depth. The most basic are the block, the cylinder, the sphere, and cone. At first, treat each of these simple building blocks as a separate step that we build on. Later, we can combine and adjust the LSF method into a personal approach that makes sense to you. Let's take a look at each of these building blocks and how they affect our gestures. Working with lines first allows us to focus on the attitude of the pose by looking at the angles, energy, and action. We will use a line for the top of the head and neck, angle of the shoulders, spine, bottom of the pelvis, upper arms, lower arms, hands, the upper legs, lower legs, and feet. These are not arbitrary lines, but represent actual parts of the anatomy. We will also use little marks to indicate the major joints of the figure. When we analyze the figure, we want to find these points to draw our lines. Each of these lines are specifically placed to represent a part of the anatomy. When we draw a figure, pay careful attention to the angles to capture the action of the pose. Lines don't need to be perfectly straight. Bones and muscles always create some type of curve, and this gives the figure more action and flow. While we draw a line for the spine, it's not truly the anatomical spine. The spinal column has a complex S-curve that is difficult to capture in a gesture. Instead, think of the line for the spine more like a center line that shows the major bend of the torso. In this case, it can always be described as a C-curve. This makes our gesture simpler to capture and the action more clear to the viewer. Now let's draw some simple line armatures. I like to start with the shoulders and torso. Once I have that, the rest seems to fall into place. But you can start anywhere that makes sense to you. Try to push your angles. Exaggerating them creates a more lively figure. Try to limit yourself to these specific lines to clearly capture the line armature. These lines give us the most basic armature, which is a structure that we build the rest of the figure on. This figure seems like it has short arms, but they're really just foreshortened. And this is one of the things that lines can't easily capture: objects moving in space. When you've got this down, these simple line armatures can take as little as 10 seconds and are great for speed gestures or thumbnailing for animation or illustration. Our next step will be to add shapes to our line armatures. The shape stage addresses the main masses of the figure and help to flesh out the body. Construct a long curve shape down from the line of the shoulders to represent the rib cage. Construct a curve shape up from the bottom of the pelvis to build the pelvis shape. Construct an oval for the head. Construct triangles or ovals for the hands and feet. When analyzing the figure, check the angles of the rib cage and pelvis to help you see how the shapes will conform to the body. Now let's do some line shape drawings that build mass. I will start with a full line armature first, and then build the shape on top. For this exercise, try to work in this order to help you learn the rhythm and structure of the figure. Later, we can explore combining these steps together. Remember that the spine will always be a C-curve for these gestures. The ribcage shape should be about twice as tall as the pelvis, and there should always be a little space between the two. For this exercise, I am switching colors between the lines and the shapes. This is to help reinforce what each building block brings to the method. It's a good exercise when you're learning this method, but you won't have to work this way all the time. When the figure is in a side view, we have to construct the shapes to be in front of the line armature, not through the center. This will give the sense the figure is in profile. Also, if your shapes are off, don't be afraid to just draw over them to adjust. These are gestures to learn from, not perfect finished drawings. We can check proportion at this stage too. The bottom of the pelvis should be the halfway point between the head and the heels. Check this early and often to maintain a proportional structure. With this basic line shape armature, we can create a sense of space by overlapping shapes. Here I've turned the pose towards the front and overlapped the shapes to give a sense of space. Building forms on top of the lines and shapes gives us the volume of the figure. We build a tall block for the rib cage and a short block for the pelvis. Use spheres as shoulder joints, cylinders for the upper arm, spheres and cylinders for the lower arms, and a wedge or a curved wedge for the hands. Cylinders for the legs, spheres for the knees, and wedges for the feet. A cylinder for the neck, and an egg or sphere for the head. The angles we previously used for the lines and shapes are the X and Y line systems. Now we need the Z line systems to build our forms for the ribcage and pelvis. When constructing the forms, look at the lower part of the ribcage and the top of the pelvis. The bony landmarks are the clearest here and will help you analyze the forms. When you draw the cylinders, you can make them tapered to mimic the natural shape of the limbs. Now our drawings exist in space. Now let's draw a complete line shape form gesture. Combine the lines and shapes into one quick pass now. Drawing the lines and shapes first gives us the action, proportion, and mass of the figure. This allows us to more easily analyze the forms of the figure. If we start with the forms, our figures tend to get stiff and the proportions are wrong. Now, use the angles and mass of the ribcage and pelvis shapes to help you build the boxes. The ribcage box should be taller than it is wide, and the pelvis box should be about half as tall as the ribcage. Be aware of the angle of the limbs to make the cylinder ellipses more open or closed depending on how foreshortened they are. The spheres for joints are optional. Sometimes they help, sometimes they aren't necessary. Forms are much more challenging for our brains to analyze, especially at the beginning of our figure drawing journey. It'll take some slow motion study to understand what angle to draw the boxes and if they're coming towards you or going away from you, but that's what this method helps you do. It breaks each stage down into an easy to digest, bite-sized chunk so you can focus on each part separately. As you do this more and more, it will get easier. Make adjustments to the line shape armature if you need to. Each stage gives you more information to analyze. Here I added a mask shape on top of the sphere of the head. When these basic forms get easy for you, you can make them more complex. Practice these steps over and over until they become second nature. It may be challenging, and it's okay to struggle, but if you don't give up, you will get it. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to go to Drawsh.com for more information on these topics and many more. If you want to see more videos like this, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one.